Welcome back to Quarter Dollar. Right here in this album are dozens of Lincoln Wheat Pennies. And yes, some of them are those famous 1943 steel cents. To most people, they look like ordinary old pocket change, but hidden among them are coins that have sold for jaw-dropping prices at auction, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's why I'm starting a brand new series where we'll uncover the stories behind these coins one by one, including the rare steel wheat pennies that took America by storm during World War II. If you love rare coin secrets and shocking values, make sure to subscribe right now, because in the upcoming videos, we'll dive deep into each of these pennies, and one of them could change the way you look at your own collection forever. First up, let's talk about this 1941 Lincoln Wheat Penny. At first glance, it may look like an ordinary old cent with decades of wear, but don't let its humble appearance fool you. This coin carries a story that makes collectors' hearts race. Struck in the early years of World War II, 1941 wheat pennies marked the beginning of a turbulent period in U.S. history when copper would soon become critical for wartime production. Millions were minted, yes, but finding one in excellent condition today is much harder than you think. Most were heavily circulated, handled by countless hands during a time of rationing and uncertainty, and many have been lost to time. That's why collectors treasure any surviving example. Even in circulated grades like this one dot asterisk now, here's where it gets exciting. A typical 1941 penny in well-worn condition might only fetch a few dollars, but uncirculated examples with their original luster have shocked bidders at auction by crossing into the thousands. And when we talk about rare mint errors, this is where the numbers soar into unbelievable territory. Double die obverses, off-center strikes, and even transitional planchet errors have been documented. And when one of those surfaces, collectors will pour in bids that climb into the six-figure range. Imagine holding a coin like this, one you might easily dismiss as pocket change, only to discover it's worth as much as a brand new luxury car. That's the magic of wheat pennies. Asterisk condition is key. And you can see on this coin the smoothness across Lincoln's cheek, the fading of "In God We Trust," and the wear across the wheat stalks on the reverse. These are all signs of heavy circulation, but that's also part of the charm. It tells us this piece of history survived more than 80 years in circulation. But if you were lucky enough to find a mint-state gem tucked away in a collection or an attic box, we'd be talking about values that can jump into the tens of thousands, and rare errors have pushed certain 1941 pennies to over $300,000 at auction. Yes, you heard that right. From 1 cent to nearly $333,000. Asterisk. And here's the real kicker. Because so many people underestimate these coins, some of the rarest varieties have been pulled straight from coin rolls, yard sales, and even changed jars sitting on kitchen counters. That means there's still a real possibility that you or someone you know has one hiding in plain sight. So before you brush off that old jar of wheat pennies, think twice. You could be sitting on a fortune without even knowing it. This is why collectors, especially seasoned ones, never pass over 1941 pennies. They know the potential is jaw-dropping asterisk, and if you're watching this right now thinking, I might have one of these, you're not alone. I'd love for you to drop a comment below if you've ever found a 1941 penny in your change or inherited one from a family collection. It's stories like yours that bring this community to life. And trust me, we've only just started. The next coin on this list is even more surprising, so stay tuned because the deeper we go, the higher the values climb. Next up, we move to a 1941 Lincoln Wheat Penny, and this one has such a fascinating story etched right into its surface. At first glance, you can see the age in every detail. The coin's surface is coated in a warm, rusty brown tone that comes only after decades of wear. The obverse still shows Lincoln's profile, but the high points of his cheek, jawline, and hair have been smoothed down from heavy circulation. His bow tie is still faintly there, but much of the detail has blended into the field. Look closely at the date 1941 with that tiny D mint mark just below it. The numbers are still crisp enough to read, but the surfaces around them carry small abrasions, the kind of marks that tell us this coin was exchanged thousands of times before it found a permanent home in someone's collection. Asterisk. The Denver Mint struck over 128 million of these pennies in 1941, so they're not considered rare in sheer numbers. But condition changes everything. Most of them were spent, lost, and damaged through years of use, which makes well-preserved survivors highly collectible. This one shows heavy wear, but that's not necessarily a weakness. In fact, coins like this spark interest because they remind us of just how much history they've traveled through pocket change during World War II, wages counted out during rationing, maybe even change from a corner store where soldiers' families bought their groceries. Each scratch and worn-down edge whispers of another life it passed through. Asterisk now. When we flip to the reverse, we see the famous wheat stalks framing 1 cent. On this piece, the wheat lines are almost completely flattened, leaving just the faint outlines of what once were sharp, detailed engravings. The phrase United States of America still stands boldly in the center, though the edges have started to blend into the field. At the top, E pluribus unum has nearly faded away. Those fine letters were always the first to wear down, and on this coin they're barely hanging on. You can also spot a few darker areas around the rim where oxidation has left small stains. This is the kind of patina that tells you the coin spent decades in less than ideal storage, maybe in a damp box or even buried for a while. Asterisk. But here's where things take a turn for the extraordinary. Although most 1941 wheat pennies are only worth a few cents in this circulated condition, collectors know that certain errors and high-grade examples can fetch jaw-dropping prices. For example, if you find a 1941 in brilliant uncirculated condition, still glowing with its original red luster, it could sell for $5,000 to $15,000 depending on the grade. And if you're lucky enough to uncover a rare double die obverse, where Lincoln's features or the date appear double from a striking mistake, the value can leap into 6 figures. Some pristine error specimens have been auctioned off for more than $350,000. Yes, a single penny worth more than most houses. Asterisk. So while this coin in hand may look humble, worn, and ordinary, the story behind the 1941 keeps collectors chasing it. It's a reminder that even the smallest coin can hold enormous potential, and that the difference between a penny worth pocket change and one worth a fortune can come down to just a few small details. That's the thrill of the hunt and why every coin deserves a second look. Next up, we've got a 1942 Lincoln Wheat Penny, and this one tells a story that stretches right back to the height of World War II. The very first thing you'll notice is its overall tone of soft, even brown patina that has settled into the coin after more than 80 years of circulation. The obverse shows Lincoln's portrait, still visible, but definitely worn down. His hairline has flattened into the field, his cheek and jaw are smoothed over, and the once crisp details of his coat have faded with time. There's a faint scratch line above the bow tie, along with tiny nicks along the rim, showing the rough journey this penny has been through in pockets, registers, and change drawers across the country. The date 1942 is still legible, though not sharp, and the mint mark isn't visible on this one, meaning it came from the main Philadelphia Mint. Asterisk. This coin's story is even more fascinating when you consider what was happening in America the year it was struck. In 1942, the United States had just entered the war, and materials like copper were suddenly in extremely high demand for ammunition and military equipment. That's why, just a year later, the mint switched to striking cents on steel planchets in 1943. So, this 1942 piece is one of the very last copper-rich wheat pennies before that dramatic change in U.S. coinage. Holding this coin is like holding the end of an era right before the shortages of the war forced the mint to adapt. Asterisk on the reverse. The wheat stalks are faint, especially near the tips where wear has erased most of the detail. The phrase 1 cent still stands strong in the center, but the lines that frame it are blended into the background. You'll also notice some darker spotting across the surface, small patches of oxidation that developed over decades. That kind of uneven toning is common in circulated wheat cents, especially those stored in boxes or coin folders exposed to humidity. While these spots lower the technical grade, they give the coin that unmistakable antique character that seasoned collectors love. Asterisk, now let's talk value. In heavily circulated condition, like the one we're looking at, this coin is worth maybe 25 to 50 cents more than face value, but nothing extraordinary yet. But here's the kicker. If you find a 1942 wheat penny in pristine, uncirculated red condition, it can bring $3,000 to $6,000 at auction. And it doesn't stop there. Rare double-die varieties from 1942, especially those showing doubling on the words "In God We Trust" or the date, can skyrocket to jaw-dropping levels. One such specimen in gem condition shocked the auction world when it sold for over $250,000. And if you uncover a 1942 struck on the wrong planchet like a silver dime or a foreign coin blank, you're looking at potential values pushing into the six-figure range. Asterisk. So while this particular penny shows the scars of its long life, it holds immense historical weight. It reminds us that even a small, worn cent can be the key to understanding America's past, how the men adapted during wartime, how families use coins like this daily, and how collectors today search for those elusive pristine survivors and rare error pieces. That's the beauty of coin hunting. Each penny, no matter how ordinary it seems, could turn out to be worth thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Next up, we've got another 1942 Lincoln Wheat Penny, but this one carries the little mint mark D under the date, showing it was struck in Denver. Right away, you can see it's a survivor that has been through heavy circulation. The obverse shows Lincoln's profile softened and worn, his once detailed hair and cheek now blending into the field. The word Liberty to the left is faint, nearly merging with the background, and the rim shows nicks and dents from years of handling. There's a dark spot right on Lincoln's cheek, almost like a permanent bruise, a reminder of how these coins picked up marks over decades in use. Running across the lower bust is a long scratch, not deep enough to gouge the metal, but enough to leave a clear scar. These are the kinds of battle marks that make each old penny completely unique. Asterisk now. 1942 was an extraordinary year in youth history. With the war effort at full swing, the mint struck more than 206 million of these at Denver alone, trying to keep up with the demand for small change. Copper was still being used at this time, but only for a short while longer. Just a year later, in 1943, the government would switch to zinc-coated steel cents to save copper for ammunition. So when you hold a 1942 D penny, you're holding one of the last wartime copper issues before that big transition. Collectors love coins from this narrow window because they represent the shift from traditional coinage into one of America's most unusual experiments, the steel cent, asterisk turning to the reverse. The two wheat stalks are barely visible, their tips flattened down by countless years of use. The words 1 cent are still bold enough to be read, though softened around the edges. Below, United States of America shows more fading, and the upper motto E pluribus unum is just a ghostly trace around the rim. There's also a dull, uneven patina with small dark patches scattered across the surface. This kind of toning shows the coin has been stored in less than ideal conditions, maybe in an old jar, a drawer, or even a damp basement where air and moisture slowly work their way into the metal. Asterisk, but here's where things get exciting. Even though the coin in this condition may only fetch around 25 cents to $1, higher grades can soar dramatically. A well-preserved 1942D in red uncirculated condition can command $1,500 to $3,500. It doesn't stop there. Error varieties from 1942D can push values into six figures. For example, there are known double-die obverse examples where the date and lettering show clear doubling. If you happen to find one of those in gem condition, You're looking at an auction hammer price easily passing $150,000. Even rarer, a 1942D penny mistakenly struck on a silver dime planchet has sold for more than $300,000, shocking the numismatic community. Asterisk. What makes these ordinary-looking coins so thrilling is that most people would overlook them. A worn brown penny like this might pass through your hands, and you'd never guess it could be linked to extraordinary rarities worth small fortunes. This is the heartbeat of coin collecting, the idea that the next coin in your change, the next old wheat cent in your drawer, could turn out to be a life-changing discovery. Asterisk. So while this particular 1942D may be battle-worn, every scratch, dent, and dark mark tells a story. It's more than just an old cent. It's a piece of living history, struck in a time when America was shifting all its resources to win a world war. And with the right variety, a coin from this year could transform from pocket change into a six-figure treasure overnight. Next up, we've got in front of us one of the most iconic oddballs of American coinage, the 1943 steel wheat penny. At first glance, you can tell it's nothing like the usual brownish-red copper cents you've seen for decades. This one shines with a silvery gray look, though after 80 years of circulation, it has dulled and picked up that chalky, worn finish that almost looks ghostly. On this particular piece, Lincoln's portrait is still visible but smooth, his cheekbone and hair details flattened from years of handling. The motto, "In God We Trust," is faint but present, arching across the top, while Liberty on the left side is worn thin, blending with the coin's surface. The date 1943 is still legible on the right, but softened, showing the hard life this coin has lived in everyday commerce. Asterisk now. The story behind why this penny looks so different is where it gets fascinating. In 1943, with World War II at full tilt, the U.S. Mint made a drastic change. Copper was a critical wartime metal, used in ammunition and shell casings, and America couldn't afford to waste it on pennies. So for the first and only time in history, the Lincoln cent was struck in zinc-coated steel. This gave the penny its distinctive silver-gray color. At the time, it must have been shocking to reach into your pocket and find a penny that looked more like a dime. Asterisk. The problem, however, was durability. The thin zinc coating wore off quickly, exposing the raw steel underneath. Steel rusts, and that's why so many surviving examples today, like this one, show dark spots, rough textures, and corrosion marks. If you look closely at this coin, you can see patches where the smooth zinc surface has broken down, leaving darker blemishes. This was one of the reasons why the Mint abandoned the steel experiment after just 1 year. Asterisk. Now let's talk value, because this is where the 1943 penny goes from ordinary to jaw-dropping. In heavily worn condition like the coin you see here, these steel cents are common and might only bring 25 to 50 cents from a collector. But step up to an uncirculated piece, one that still has its original silvery brilliance, and now you're talking $20, $50, sometimes even $200, depending on the mint mark. And if you find a gem-quality steel penny with perfect luster and no spots, it can fetch $2,500 or more at auction. Asterisk. But the real shock comes from the errors. During 1943, a few pennies were mistakenly struck on leftover copper planchets instead of steel. These are the legendary 1943 copper cents, and they are worth an absolute fortune. Fewer than 40 are known across all mints. One sold at auction for more than $1.7 million. Imagine that, a single penny paying for a house, a car, and still leaving you with life-changing money. Asterisk. Even among the steel cents themselves, error varieties are valuable. Some were struck off-center, some showed double dies on the date or motto, and a few were struck on thin or improperly plated planchets, giving them an odd appearance collector's chase. These can push the value into the thousands. Asterisk. So this worn little steel wheat penny may not look like much, but it represents a rare 1 year experiment in American coinage. It's a window into a time when every scrap of copper was being used to fight a world war, and the mint had to innovate just to keep coins in people's pockets. For collectors today, it's a fascinating piece of history. And if you happen to come across one of the rare errors or copper strikes, it could be the ticket to an unbelievable payday. Next up, we have a fascinating coin that instantly grabs attention, the 1943 steel wheat penny. At first glance, it may not look as glamorous as gold or silver coins, but this simple piece of steel is one of the most iconic coins in U.S. history. When we look closely at this specific example, its surface tells a remarkable story. Asterisk. This coin was struck in 1943 at the Denver Mint. During the height of World War II, copper was in high demand for ammunition, shell casings, and other war materials. So the U.S. Mint made the bold decision to shift penny production to zinc-coated steel. This single year of steel cents has made 1943 one of the most talked about dates in the entire Lincoln cent series. Your coin here is a genuine survivor of that turbulent period. Asterisk, now let's study the coin itself. On the obverse, Abraham Lincoln's portrait is still visible, though the decades have worn away much of the detail. His cheek and jawline appear flat, and the finer hairlines that once gave the portrait life are mostly gone. Across the top rim, "In God We Trust" can still be read, though some letters are weak from heavy circulation and corrosion. On the left, the word Liberty is soft and partially faded into the metal. On the right, the date 1943 stands bold and unmistakable, with the tiny D mint beneath it, signaling its Denver origin. Even through the wear, this date and mint mark remains strong, giving the coin its collectible identity. Asterisk, turning to the reverse, we see the classic wheat ear design, a tribute to America's agricultural heritage. The words 1 cent are clearly visible in large font at the center, and below them, United States of America. Although the coin has been exposed to elements that cause rust and discoloration, the design is still identifiable. The 2 wheat stalks framing the lettering are heavily worn, their lines almost melted into the surface from years of pocket use. At the top, the motto E pluribus unum is present but faint, fighting for visibility through patches of corrosion. Asterisk, this kind of wear is not unusual for 1943 steel cents. Their zinc coating was thin, and once it wore away, the exposed steel core was vulnerable to rusting. That's why so many steel cents today, just like this one, show spotting, dark stains, and rough patches. Some collectors may pass over coins in this condition, but they still hold historical significance. After all, every scratch and spot on this penny is evidence of the time it spent in circulation during one of the most challenging years in American history. Asterisk. Now, here's where the shock factor comes in. Most circulate 1943D steel cents like this are worth between 25 cents and a few dollars, depending on condition. But there's a twist that makes collectors dream big. In a few extremely rare cases, the mint mistakenly struck 1943 cents on leftover copper planchets from 1942. One such 1943D copper penny sold for over $1.7 million at auction. That's right, a penny worth millions. Imagine checking your change, thinking you had just another steel cent, only to realize it was the legendary copper error. That's the kind of discovery that gives collectors goosebumps. Asterisk, even without the error. Though, a 1943D steel cent remains a must-have in any Lincoln cent collection. It represents innovation, wartime sacrifice, and one of the most unique years in American coinage. Holding one in your hand is like holding a piece of history, a reminder that even the smallest coin can carry a massive story. Asterisk. So next time you come across one of these gray silver wheat pennies, don't ignore it. Look closer. Test it with a magnet. Examine it for errors. Because while most will be worth $1 or $2, a lucky few could be worth life-changing money. And that possibility is what makes coin collecting so exciting. Next up, we've got something that almost seems unreal, a 1944D steel wheat penny. Now, at first glance, it might just look like another old, worn-down coin with rust and spots across the surface. But here's the catch. Pennies in 1944 weren't supposed to be made out of steel at all. By that year, the mint had returned to copper after experimenting with steel cents only in 1943. Yet, a few mistakes slipped through, and what you're seeing here is one of those rare errors that has become the stuff of legend. Asterisk. Take a close look at the obverse. You can still see Abraham Lincoln's portrait standing tall, even though the coin's surface is heavily worn with a gray, almost ghostly look from the zinc coating. Rust stains and corrosion speckle across the field, especially near the rim and by the word Liberty. The date 1944 is still crisp, and just below it is the D mint mark, confirming that this was struck in Denver. Now imagine this. Almost every single 1944 D penny ever struck was copper. Only a microscopic handful of steel planchets, leftovers from 1943, accidentally got fed into the Denver presses. That mistake turned into one of the rarest and most valuable coins in American history. Asterisk, flip it over to the reverse, and the mystery deepens. The familiar wheat ears are still visible, though the surface is pitted and scarred with decades of wear. The words 1 cent and United States of America can be seen, but they're faint against the steel background. And yet, this humble-looking coin, with its simple wheat design and rust stains, has auction records in the hundreds of thousands. Yes, you heard that right. Hundreds of thousands of dollars for something that most people would overlook in their pocket change. Asterisk. So why so valuable? The answer lies in rarity. Experts estimate fewer than 20 of these 1944D steel cents exist today, making them rarer than the famous 1909 SVDB or even the 1914D penny. They're a pure accident of history, struck when leftover steel blanks from 1943 accidentally got mixed into the 1944 copper production run. And here's where it gets even crazier. Collectors will pay jaw-dropping amounts just to own one. In fact, one example of the 1944D steel penny has sold for over $115,000, while another reached nearly $250,000 at a public auction. That means this beat-up little coin could very well be worth more than a luxury sports car. Asterisk. Think about it for a moment. You're looking at a coin with scratches, rust, and heavy wear, the kind of piece most people would toss aside as junk. But to the right collector, this exact type of coin is priceless. And if it were discovered in a higher grade, say uncirculated condition, with sharp details and a bright steel shine, the value could soar into the $500,000 range or even more. Asterisk. So the next time you come across an old penny with that silvery color, don't dismiss it too quickly. You might just be holding one of the rarest minting errors of all time. And this 1944D steel wheat penny proves it. A humble little cent that has shocked the coin collecting world again and again with staggering values at auction. Next up, we have the 1944 Lincoln Wheat Penny. And right away, this coin pulls us into an incredible chapter of American history. Unlike the steel cent struck in 1943, the 1944 wheat penny returned to its traditional bronze composition of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. But there's a story hidden within that shift. Much of the copper used to strike these coins actually came from recycled shell casings, collected during World War II. In other words, this isn't just a penny. It's a piece of war history, carrying within it the remnants of battles and the sacrifices of that era. To hold this coin is to literally hold a fragment of America's fight for freedom. Asterisk, looking closely at this particular coin, the obverse features Abraham Lincoln's bust as designed by Victor David Brenner. The details of Lincoln's profile are still visible here, though softened with time. You can see clear signs of circulation wear, particularly across Lincoln's cheekbone, jawline, and shoulder. The date 1944 is still sharp enough to read, though the Liberty and parts of In God We Trust are faded, showing just how much this coin has been handled in its lifetime. Notice the surface toning, patches of reddish-brown with darker spots scattered across the fields. These colors are typical of bronze wheat cent that spent decades exposed to varying environments, from pockets to drawers, perhaps even surviving humid conditions that left behind subtle oxidation. Each of these marks tells its own story of survival. Asterisk flipped to the reverse, and you're greeted with the iconic wheat ears flanking 1 cent and United States of America. This side has a lot of character. There's noticeable discoloration and blotchy reddish-purple toning that almost gives it a fire-kissed look. The wheat stalks themselves show wear, with much of the fine detail smoothed away, but their outlines are still clear enough to identify the design. The legend E pluribus unum at the top rim is faint, but just visible. This coin's condition is what collectors would describe as heavily circulated, yet it still carries a unique charm, the kind that appeals to those who appreciate coins with history written into every scratch and stain. Asterisk now. Let's talk about value. For the 1944 wheat penny, millions were struck, over $1.4 billion across the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints. In circulated condition like this one, most examples are worth anywhere from a few cents up to a couple of dollars. However, higher grade uncirculated examples can bring in $30 to $50, and superb gem examples graded MS-67 or higher can hit $10,000 or more. But the real shock factor comes with rare error coins. For instance, some 1944 wheat pennies were mistakenly struck on leftover steel planchets from 1943. These rare transitional errors can fetch astronomical sums, with auction prices soaring well beyond $450,000. Imagine pulling a penny from pocket change only to discover it's worth nearly $500,000. Asterisk. This particular 1944 penny may not be in mint state, but it holds incredible sentimental and historical value. The war-era connection, the recycled copper from shell casings, and its worn but powerful design make it a coin worth keeping. For collectors, it serves as a reminder that even the most common-looking coins can hide astonishing stories and sometimes shocking values. Asterisk. So, the next time you come across a 1944 wheat penny, don't dismiss it as just another old cent. Take a closer look, because under the wear and toning could lie one of the greatest hidden treasures in U.S. coinage history. Here we are with the 1944D Lincoln Wheat Penny, a coin that immediately grabs attention because it sits right in the middle of one of the most fascinating chapters in U.S. coinage history. At first glance, this coin might look like an ordinary piece of copper with some circulation wear, but the truth is, coins from this era carry secrets that can surprise even seasoned collectors. Let's carefully walk through its details, its history, its current condition, and why some examples of this very same year and mint mark have sold for prices that would leave you in absolute disbelief. Asterisk. The year 1944 was a pivotal one for used coinage. During World War II, the government had experimented with steel pennies in 1943 to save copper for the war effort. However, those steel cents quickly rusted and were unpopular with the public. So in 1944, the mint returned to using copper, but not brand new copper. It actually came from recycled shell casings from the war. That means many 1944 wheat pennies, including this one, are literally minted from remnants of World War II. Just imagine, a spent artillery shell from the battlefield could have been melted down and repurposed into the very penny you see here. That connection to history alone makes the 1944D penny extraordinary. Asterisk. Looking at the obverse, we can see Abraham Lincoln's profile, though it's softened with circulation. The word liberty is still visible to the left, though worn, and the motto asterisk "In God We Trust" asterisk arcs across the top. The date 1944 is clear, with that all-important D mint mark just below signaling that it was struck in Denver. Denver produced hundreds of millions of these coins, but only a fraction survive today in collectible condition. And within those, certain rare varieties exist, such as the famous 1944D steel cent, an accidental minting error where leftover steel planchets from 1943 were used. Those incredibly rare 1944D steel cents have sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars at auction. That's right, a penny worth more than $300,000 simply because of its metallic composition. Asterisk now. Let's flip to the reverse. The wheat ears, which give the wheat penny its name, frame the denomination asterisk 1 cent asterisk and asterisk United States of America, asterisk above. Asterisk e pluribus unum asterisk still clings to the rim, though heavy wear makes it faint. This particular coin has clearly circulated for decades. Look at the rim softness and surface wear. But that's part of its story. Every scratch, every mark tells us it passed through countless hands in the mid-20th century, buying everything from wartime rations to post-war candy. Asterisk. So what about value? A heavily circulated 1944D penny like this one might only bring a few cents to a couple of dollars in the collector market. However, in higher grades, with original red luster intact, these can command $50, $100, even up to $300 depending on condition. And the shocking part is, if this coin had been one of those ultra-rare 1944D steel cents instead of copper, we will be talking about a coin worth as much as $450,000 or more in top condition. That's the kind of life-changing discovery some collectors dream of, and it's why checking every coin is so important. Asterisk. What makes this particular example fascinating isn't just its potential value, but its role as a witness to history. Struck from recycled wartime materials, bearing the Denver mint mark, and surviving nearly 80 years, this penny is a tiny but powerful reminder of America's resilience during one of its most challenging times. While not all of them will make you rich, the thrill is in the hunt because you never know when you'll find the one that does. Asterisk. And that's why I always tell viewers, don't dismiss these old copper coins. The 1944D wheat penny could be a common copper cent, or it could turn out to be a six-figure rarity. Either way, it's a treasure of American history hiding in plain sight. Let's close out this lineup with the 1944 S Lincoln Wheat Penny, a coin that carries its own unique legacy and a touch of West Coast history. Right away, the S mint mark beneath the date tells us it was struck at the San Francisco Mint, a facility known for producing lower mintages compared to Philadelphia and Denver. While hundreds of millions of pennies were made in 1944 overall, only a fraction came out of San Francisco, making this coin scarcer and more desirable to collectors. Asterisk on the obverse. We see Abraham Lincoln's portrait, still recognizable despite decades of circulation wear. His cheek and jawline have softened with time, and the fields around his profile show plenty of contact marks from years of use. The word liberty is visible, though faint, and the motto asterisk, in God we trust asterisk curves along the upper rim, showing its age with some fading at the edges. The date 1944 remains clear, with that small S mint mark directly below a tiny letter that makes a huge difference in the world of numismatics. Asterisk now. The reverse side continues the classic wheat penny design, with two wheat ears framing the denomination asterisk, 1 cent asterisk, and the words asterisk United States of America, asterisk at the top. Asterisk e pluribus unum asterisk is still there, though worn down from circulation. The surfaces show heavy wear and some discoloration, signs that this penny has passed through countless hands for nearly 80 years. But despite the wear, the design is still intact, and that mint mark ensures it stands out in any collection. Asterisk historically, the 1944 S wheat penny is fascinating because, like the other 1944 issues, it was struck from recycled wartime shell casings. Every one of these coins connects back to the end of World War II, when America was transitioning from the hardships of rationing to the prosperity of the post-war era. These weren't just coins, they were symbols of a nation rebuilding and moving forward. Holding one today is like holding a small fragment of history in your palm. Asterisk. In terms of value, this coin in well-circulated condition, like the one pictured, is typically worth a few cents to maybe $1 or $2. However, in higher grades, say, mint state with full red luster, the value jumps significantly. Collectors will pay $50, $100, and in pristine examples, even several $100s for a 1944S. And of course, there's always that exciting possibility of an error. Like its Denver cousin, there are extremely rare 1944S steel cents known to exist, struck accidentally on leftover 1943 planchettes. Those can command six-figure prices, reaching over $400,000 at major auctions. That's the kind of shock factor that keeps collectors constantly checking their pocket change. Asterisk. So, while this particular 1944S coin shows heavy wear and modest value on its own, its story is what makes it shine. It's a piece of San Francisco's minting history, a relic of the World War II era, and a reminder that sometimes the smallest coins carry the biggest stories. And who knows? The next 1944S you stumble upon could turn out to be one of those ultra-rare steel cents worth a life-changing fortune.